Welcome to our deep dive. This time it's all about Legolas Greenleaf.
Oh, Legolas.
He's such a fascinating character, and
Yeah.
you've sent us some really interesting sources about him. I mean, we all remember him as, the super skilled archer and the elf.
Right.
But we're going to go way deeper than that. We're going to look at what makes him tick, like his elven background, his relationships,
Yeah, for sure.
and even those little moments that show, like his hidden depths.
It's amazing how Tolkien created him, right? He's got all those classic elven qualities, the grace, the connection to nature, that sense of, timeless wisdom.
Yeah.
But he also grows and changes so much throughout the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, how does a prince of Mirkwood, this isolated woodland realm, become a champion for all of Middle-earth? That's what we're going to explore.
It all starts with his roots, Legolas being the son of Thranduil, the Elven king of Mirkwood. It's not just like a fun fact. It's really key to understanding him.
Okay, so let's imagine Mirkwood for a second. What's it like there? How would that have shaped Legolas when he was growing up?
Well, picture this. You've got a forest. It's deep in shadows, ancient trees everywhere. It's really silent, but like a watchful silence,
Yeah.
It's very different from Lothlorien, which feels much more open and luminous.
Right.
And the Sylvan elves who live there, they're so in tune with nature, but they're also incredibly protective of their realm.
I kind of have to be right.
They've seen so much darkness over the centuries.
Yeah.
So there's this wariness woven into who they are.
That makes me think of how Legolas is so sensitive to everything around him. Like, he can sense enemies coming way before anyone else, and how he reacts to that Oliphant in the Two Towers.
Oh, yeah.
He describes it as a terror for which there is no word in any tongue.
That line, it just gets me every time.
Yeah.
It really shows how deeply he perceives things. He understands how wrong that creature is, on a fundamental level. It's not just fear. It's like he gets how much it disrupts the natural order of things.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. So this sensitivity, this deep connection to the forest, it must have affected how he interacted with the other members of the Fellowship, right?
Absolutely. Think about it. He's the only elf in this incredibly diverse group.
Yeah, that's true.
He's thrown into a situation where he has to bridge this huge cultural gap.
Which is not easy, especially with all that history between elves and dwarves.
Oh, definitely. And yet he handles it all with such grace and open-mindedness.
It really says a lot about him. He's willing to challenge all of those preconceived notions.
Exactly.
He's like the embodiment of that elven ideal of diplomacy and balance.
Yeah.
Even when he's dealing with, well, Gimli's grumbling.
Oh, Gimli.
Their friendship is just the best. It's so heartwarming. How does that even happen, though, given their history?
Well, it's so clever how Tolkien uses their initial, friction to show Legolas's capacity for growth. At first, you can feel that tension, that awareness of the, age-old animosity between their races. But then as they journey together, facing all those dangers and celebrating their triumphs, that tension starts to fade. And it turns into respect and eventually this deep and lasting friendship.
I love their little rivalry, too, like when they're trying to see who can kill the most orcs.
Oh, yeah.
It's so fun. It shows that even in the middle of a war, there's still room for camaraderie and even humor.
Definitely. And you see their differences melt away during those lighter moments. They learn to appreciate each other's strengths, like Gimli's incredible loyalty and Legolas's amazing grace and agility.
It really shows how open-minded and humble Legolas is. He doesn't let centuries of prejudice get in the way of connecting with Gimli.
It challenges that stereotype we have of elves being distant or aloof. Legolas breaks the mold. He sees Gimli as an equal, almost like a kindred spirit, and that says so much about who he is.
It makes me think about his relationship with Aragorn, too. He's a prince, after all. But he's totally fine with following Aragorn's lead.
That's a really good point. Legolas' loyalty to Aragorn never wavers. He can see that Aragorn has what it takes to be a true king, someone worth being loyal to. And remember, elves have this incredibly long view of history.
Right, they've seen it all.
They've witnessed the rise and fall of so many kingdoms.
So for Legolas to pledge his loyalty to Aragorn so quickly, it means he must really trust and respect him.
Exactly. He sees Aragorn's inherent nobility, his compassion, his commitment to protecting everyone in Middle-earth.
It's not just words, either. Legolas proves his loyalty through action, like at the Battle of Helm's Deep. He's fighting side by side with men, defending people he might have kept his distance from in the past.
That's such a pivotal moment in his development. He's not just fighting for his elven kin or even for Aragorn. He's fighting for the future of Middle-earth as a whole.
It's like his sense of responsibility has grown beyond Mirkwood. He's become a true champion for everyone fighting against Sauron.
And that evolution ties into another fascinating thing about Legolas. Those little shifts in his personality, those hidden depths that your sources talked about.
Oh yeah, I wanted to get into that. He's often seen as this stoic, unemotional elf. But there are these glimpses of something more, especially when he's talking about nature.
I know exactly what you mean, like that scene in the books when the Fellowship is going through Lothlorien. Legolas looks up at the elven city and says, "Fair indeed are the leaves and flowers and fountains of the Eldar in the autumn of their days."
Ugh, so beautiful and sad at the same time.
It is, right?
It's like he's aware of how time passes. And there's this well of emotion under that calm surface.
It suggests a kind of melancholy, like he understands how beautiful and fragile the world is.
And that awareness, his connection to nature, it must play a part in his decision to leave Middle-earth, right? The source had said he sails west, like he doesn't belong anymore.
You're right. You've hit on something really important there. It's like he's seen too much loss, too much change. And elves are tied to the fate of Middle-earth, but they're also meant to leave eventually.
It's kind of heartbreaking. He fought so hard for this world. But in the end, his elven nature calls him somewhere else.
It shows the bittersweet nature of their existence. They're guardians, but they're also just passing through. And for Legolas, his journey through Middle-earth has changed him so much. He's made these deep connections, felt incredible joy and terrible sorrow, and that shapes where he ends up.
It makes you think about Tolkien's whole vision for elves. They're these ancient beings, wise and graceful, but they also carry this sadness, this longing for a paradise they've lost.
And Legolas represents that perfectly. He's a warrior and a poet, a fiercely loyal friend and a quiet observer. And that's why he's so compelling in the books and the films.
Speaking of the films, we should probably talk about how different he is in them.
Yeah.
It's hard not to think of him like jumping across those collapsing bridges, taking out orcs left and right. He's practically a superhero with a bow and arrow.
Peter Jackson definitely played up that warrior side of him. And it makes for some incredible scenes. Seeing him move with such grace, even in the middle of battle, it's pretty amazing.
Visually, it's stunning, for sure. But do you think maybe all that action overshadows some of the, quieter stuff from the books? You know, the more introspective side of Legolas?
That's a good question. In the books, Legolas' strength is often in his quiet observation, that almost like supernatural awareness he has. He's less about showy fighting and more about subtle wisdom.
Like a true elf.
Right, exactly.
Less brute force, more about the connection to nature and understanding how the world works.
And Tolkien himself always seemed to prefer that more understated approach with elves. They were supposed to be these ethereal beings, separate from the more, down-to-earth concerns of men and dwarves.
So maybe the movie Legolas, even though he looks so cool, isn't exactly what Tolkien had in mind.
Maybe not entirely, but you have to consider the impact the movies had. That warrior elf idea is super popular in fantasy, and the films definitely tapped into that. They brought Tolkien's world to a whole new audience, even if they changed things a bit.
True, true. And I think both versions of Legolas capture something important about him. He's that graceful, wise elf, but he's also a skilled warrior, willing to fight for what's right. It's like those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Exactly. He's a complex character. He doesn't fit neatly into any box. And that's part of why people love him so much.
It makes that question we asked earlier even more interesting. What would Legolas think of the world today?
Oh, man.
If you came back to Middle-earth now,
What a thought.
can you imagine him seeing skyscrapers and airplanes?
The internet. Things he could never have dreamed of.
I bet he'd be blown away by all our technology. Especially the stuff that lets us connect with nature in new ways. Like those amazing nature documentaries. They show you animals up close in such detail.
I think he'd love that. Maybe even something like Google Earth. He could see how all the ecosystems are connected.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I also wonder if he'd be really sad about how much we've destroyed. The pollution, climate change, all that.
He would be. He's so connected to the natural world. Seeing how much we've damaged it would really affect him.
It's a tough thing to think about. But it's important. Legolas's story makes us think about our own relationship with nature, to appreciate how beautiful and fragile it is, and to remember that we have to protect it.
His journey reminds us that even small acts of courage and kindness matter. He fought for the future of Middle-earth, and we have a responsibility to do what we can to make the world a better place.
Well said. As we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Legolas Greenleaf, I encourage you to keep exploring Tolkien's work. There's so much wisdom and wonder to discover. And who knows, maybe you'll even find yourself inspired to make a difference in your own corner of Middle-earth.